Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillah wa salatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. The topic of our discussion here today is on getting lost and finding Allah in the Islamic tradition. And it's kind of a story of my own experience in the last 12 years trying to study and understand Islam. But before that story even starts, it starts with someone who I didn't know at that time. And that was my wife. Because my wife, when she was a young woman in high school, she watched this documentary on Al-Azhar University. And when she saw this documentary on Al-Azhar University in Egypt, the second oldest educational institution in the world, has been in existence for over 1,000 years, she said to herself, and she made this dua that, "Oh Allah, let me study in this place." And this was long before I ever even came into the practice of Islam, many years before I even existed on the radar of belief. And yet this woman made this dua very early on, and I was the recipient of the benefit of that dua several years later. So when we fast forward and I make it to my university experience, when I'm at the University of California in San Diego, a combination of factors actually hit me all at the same time and led me into the acceptance of this faith. Amongst them was the reading of the autobiography of Malcolm X. Amongst them was the influences of the underground hip-hop scene. Amongst them was actually meeting the Muslims. Many people say, I'm glad I learned about Islam before I learned from the Muslims. But I myself actually am glad that I met the Muslims before I learned about Islam, because they tempered and moderated my experience and understanding of Islam. Because when I was understanding Islam only from books, I was really, really serious. And so those things came together. Eventually, I married my wife. And we decided that we were going to go, however we were going to go, to Egypt in order to study Islam. And so we were in college and we were repeating this slogan. It was a very popular slogan in those days. I want to study Islam, I want to study Islam, I want to study Islam. And the first lesson that we learned when we got to Egypt and we started to study Islam is that we really had no idea what that meant. We didn't know anything about Islam. We were active in the Muslim community, we were leading youth groups, we were leading study circles, we were dealing with people, we were engaging in conferences. She was speaking in conferences. And we realized that actually we don't know Islam. So the first thing that we learned on that journey, the first getting lost, was realizing that that is not actually the case. We don't know it. And it wasn't until I sat down with a very dear brother, an imam now, who's a Puerto Rican convert, and he sat down with me on a piece of paper and he wrote to me all of the different areas of Islamic sciences. He said, here's the sciences related to the Quran, here's the sciences related to the Hadith, here's the sciences related to law, permissibility, not permissibility, here's the sciences related to purification of the soul and personal development. And we had a whole sheet of paper with all of these different disciplines that I knew nothing about, but yet I wanted to study Islam. So that was the first step of getting lost. The second step in getting lost was realizing that I actually didn't know how to study either. I had done really well all throughout high school, all throughout middle school, went to UCSD straight, not as a transfer student, did well at UCSD, and yet I didn't actually know how to study. Because most of the time when we go to school not the way that we are supposed to go to school as Muslims. We go to school in order to get grades, in order to get degrees. And the educational tradition of Islam is not that we go to school to get grades and to get degrees. The educational system of Islam is that we go to school in order to learn. And in learning, we come to deeper understandings of ourselves, and we come to deeper understandings of our communities, and we come to deeper understandings of our Lord. And in the combination of all of those type of threads, we come to a spiritual and intellectual and social maturity that helps us in being good and beneficial human beings. That's not a degree. That's not a grade. And so I got through college writing papers in the last minute, doing all those type of things, and I found myself now in front of a teacher there is no running from, studying a language that I do not know, with no one else in that classroom other than my wife, and 5 hours of Arabic in the class with the teacher and 3 to 5 hours at home if you're going to get anywhere in 9 months. And that's when I realized just a little bit of what studying actually is. Because I still didn't know, because we still were not students of Islamic knowledge. We were students of Arabic. And people used to mix this up a lot. We came back after 9 months. People are saying, can you speak about this? Can you speak about that? Can you talk about this issue? I said, no, I can't talk about that issue. I studied grammar for 9 months. I studied rhetoric. I studied morphology, how words are built and put together in sentences. What do you want me to give a lecture on? I didn't study that. And so eventually we went back and we spent a number of more years. And we started to get exposed step by step to the tradition and the rigor of Islamic scholarship throughout the centuries. This is not some haphazard thrown together project of illiterate or patriarchal or misogynistic people who didn't understand anything about the world and were living in their castles. This is not what it was. These were human beings. Yes, they had issues, but they were also righteous and good human beings, many of them. And the ones that were not, they got sifted through in time. We're not talking about one individual. We're not talking about one school. We're not talking about 3 schools or 4 schools. We're talking about thousands and thousands of people over hundreds and hundreds of years. And so we realize that studying is not just passing an exam. Studying is not getting some sort of paper together. But studying is a dedication to how we live. We live trying to attain a deeper understanding of truth. We live trying and struggling to come to a better grip on who we are and what sources influence our own lives. The third thing that we led to was that we're responsible for our own faith, because we went from being so active to studying Arabic. And very quickly we realized that we were living our Islam on training wheels. We were relying on every other person that we were around to make sure that our faith was okay. And when all of those classes were gone, and when we couldn't understand prayer, we couldn't understand a reminder, we're not teaching anyone, we're not dealing with anything, the only thing you have to keep yourself afloat is yourself. What is going on with your prayer? What is going on with your remembrance of Allah? How sincere are you in what you're doing? It's personal. And you have personal and self-responsibility in that path. And that was the third major lesson that we learned in this getting lost issue. Number 4, and the final one, and the most painful one, was that we study Islam and we do not study people. We faced a lot of extremely painful things in that time in Egypt. Living in Egypt is not living in America. For those of you who do not know, it is not the same. Living in Egypt, you face extreme poverty every single day. You face extreme oppression every single day. You face it in your classroom. You face it in your daily life. You have teachers who tell you, my wife asked the teacher, she was better than me in Arabic. She asked the teacher, how come his grade is better than mine on the exam? Teacher straight up told her, I think that the husband should have a better grade than the wife. Straight up. It's very painful. Many classes I was told, there's a class going on in this subject or that subject. People said, I said, can my wife attend? They said, my wife cannot attend. I said, I'm not going. People said, brother, you should study. You don't go there. You know, you both are going to learn, inshallah, when you go back home. It's important and all these things. I said, I don't care. If she can't go, I'm not going. And if Allah puts barakah in our studies, He puts blessings in our studies, there will be blessings in our studies. If He takes it out because of the oppression that we experienced, He takes it out. And it's not going anywhere. You have teachers that were corrupt. You have, when you come back, dealing with before we came back and after we came back. Religious leaders who are corrupt. People who have made mistakes, people who are arrogant, people who take advantage of others, people who don't know how to deal with money, people who don't know how to deal with their own desires. All of these issues hit you right in the face. And the only thing you're reminded over and over and over and over again is that I do not study people, I study Islam. I do not follow people, I follow Islam. I do not seek people, I seek Allah. And if you are going to get lost and find yourself in the tradition of Islamic scholarship, you will get lost in the face of a lot of things. You get lost in the face of, yes, some misogyny. You get lost, yes, in front of a lot of racism, in front of a lot of discrimination, in front of a lot of materialism. You get lost in front of a lot of things. But you also find that it is a powerful and a strong and a good tradition, and that we have great things in that tradition. And we have a path of spiritual development. We have a path of service and dedication and commitment to other human beings. And most importantly, we have a path collectively, not as the individuals, but collectively through the entire body of all of this dedication, we have a path that leads us to worship Allah and not to worship ourselves. So in getting lost, you actually are able to find the truth. And this is just some of the small things from that journey. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept from us and to forgive us. Jazakumullah khairun. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.